And I'll invite Morag Rose to do her presentation for us now. Are you there, Morag?
Yep. Hi. Right. Just let me get my shared screen up. Where am I? Here we go. So hi. Yeah, I'm trying to. I've been asked to cover quite a lot of work in 5 minutes. So basically, this is a whistle-stop tour of my last 15 years, really. So in 2006, I formed an organisation called the LRM, the Loiterers Resistance Movement. And I know that there are some people here who've wandered with us, but I'll start from the beginning for those that don't know. So this was our manifesto. The LRM, Loiterers Resistance Movement, is a Manchester-based collective of artists, activists and wanderers interested in psychogeography, public space, creative mischief and the hidden stories of the city. We can't agree on what psychogeography means, but we all like plants growing out of the side of buildings, looking at things from new angles, radical history, drinking tea, getting lost, DIY map making and feeling like a tourist in your hometown. Gentrification, where am I? Sorry, advertising and blandness make us sad. We believe there's magic in the Mancunian rain. Our city is wonderful and made for more than shopping. The streets belong to everyone and we want to reclaim them for play and revolutionary fun. On the first Sunday of every month, we go for a wander of some sort and we organise occasional festivals, exhibitions, spectacles and random shenanigans. Everyone is welcome. So there's a few photographs, images here of things that, to be honest, look like they're from a bygone age, really, when we could all walk together. Essentially for me and for the LRM, psychogeography is about feelings and space, and it's about using walking as a way to critically engage, to have a conversation with the city and with each other. And it's also about creating those moments of serendipity and enchantment and magic that happen when you're in a shared space. And it's also really importantly for me about social and spatial justice and for different kinds of bodies to assert their right to be in space within Manchester, but we have colleagues all over the place. So we do kind of creative walking games, alternative tours of the city, various interventions in space, ranging from, you know, moving A-boards to singing songs and sharing history, all kinds of things. We've obviously had to adapt during the pandemic because we couldn't meet in person on that first Sunday anymore, but I was pretty determined that I wasn't going to stop. So instead we've adapted to using technology so that we can walk together alone on those first Sundays. So basically whoever wants to joins the group. There's a live WhatsApp conversation where we share what we're doing. There's also prompts shared on Twitter, Facebook and our website. I always try and keep, well, it's always been really important to me that LRM events are free and we didn't want to use technology that was exclusive to people. So we're still very low tech. It's not the same, obviously, and clearly some people aren't as keen, but there have been some unexpected advantages. So for example, we've increased access in some ways so people can join us wandering indoors, or the last first Sunday we had walkers in Berlin and New York and Glossop and various other locations, as well as Manchester, who were sharing where they were with us. And I think, I mean, we all know everything's been affected by COVID-19. One of the really particular things has been that attention to local walking and the everyday environment. And that has been absolutely brilliant. And in terms of what I've been talking about for a long time, really, a lot of my work supported that. But I'm not uncritical about some of those changes. So, for example, a lot of the spaces that have been opened up for walking have actually mainly been for shopping. I've had evidence from people who've been harassed for walking too slowly, or kind of street harassment for people on their own, things like that. So there are still conflicts, and I don't want to be overly rosy about the potential for, you know, local walking in the COVID world. This kind of leads me on nicely to the other half of my work. Because I've been so concerned about spatial justice issues, access inequality, a few years ago, I left my job in community development to do a PhD where I looked at women's experiences of walking in Manchester, spent a brilliant summer talking and walking to different women. And clearly women isn't one group. There's a lot of intersectional differences between them, but something that we all had in common was their walking is limited by harassment, by material factors as well. You know, it's a really, we really need a holistic approach to access that thinks about not just the fabric of the environment, but the atmosphere, and also actually keeping spaces interesting. The image near the bottom there of Shoot Hill tram station, that little scrap of land there was something that came up again and again as a place that people told me they really liked. Those sorts of accidental, unplanned spaces really matter. So I think it's important to remember different kinds of bodies use the city, and we want to integrate access, which is basically good for everybody. So really, there's, again, a few sides to this. I mean, as a disabled person, I'm aware that a lot of environments I'm simply not welcome because I haven't been considered in the design. And actually, if we thought about embedding that design immediately from the beginning, then actually it would benefit everybody, because if somebody with a chair can use it, so can somebody with a suitcase or, you know, a pram or whatever. And Manchester hasn't always had the best history of inclusion and consultation. There's a photograph there of the Peterloo Memorial as an example of how things can go wrong. So I'm really keen to keep harping on to think about walking, think about different kinds of walking, and think about access. The final strand of my work is about ownership of land and rights away, because I think that's really important as well. And I've been involved with various campaigns over the years. The most recent thing that's still brewing actually is around access to the Irwell, around the New Bailey development, making sure that public right of way is maintained. Even though it's not a particularly great or accessible patch of land, to lose it, I think, is a loss of potential and a loss of making things better. The towpaths and waterways in Manchester are a particular interest to me, partly from an academic research point of view, but also just really personally. They're a place that I really love walking, and I think we need to protect them and keep them open. So that's really everything in a couple of minutes. But just to also say, everyone's always welcome to join any of the LRM events. And if you're interested in reading any of my research or publications, more than happy to share, and hopefully some questions now as well. So thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. A couple of questions from me to kick off. I mean, from what you've seen and heard of the plans for the Bee Network so far, how satisfied are you that inclusivity, that access for all has really been a consideration?
I would say it's sometimes been patchy. I think there's a lot of good intentions, but I've been to a few events where I wasn't convinced actually that access was that important. I have to say that I'm staying at the moment along where the work is happening for the Chiltern Road cycleway, and on a very personal level, I'm regularly almost getting killed because of the work that's going on and the lack of safe transit for pedestrians. So I'm glad you've asked me that today. I'd really like care around where the building work happens to be considered. I don't know, I kind of feel like the Bee Network is such a huge thing. I don't necessarily want to make a sweeping judgment about everything, to be honest. And I do know that there have been some disabled people and disabled people's organisations who have been involved throughout. But I think it's something that just needs to get into the habit of always thinking about, you know. And I know historically, pedestrians and kind of walking, we've been a much more quiet voice in a lot of plans than cyclists, and that is not an anti-cycling comment. I love cycles. I don't have one. I can't ride one. I also can't drive either. So I think that we do need to just remember that it is about walking too, because it's very easy to sometimes forget, really. I'm just sorry, I was just trying to read the chat as well, which I realise I can't do at the same time.
A question from PNG, whoever the mysterious PNG is. The quality of space and welcoming nature of a space or route, walk or cycleway is fundamental to success in use. How do you see mitigating loss or degraded maintenance of these spaces over their lifetime, particularly when there are pressures on local authority funding? Like, is it down to volunteers to maintain them, like with, I don't know, the Transpennine Trail and things like that?
That's a really good question, and obviously in my ideal world, everywhere would be really well maintained, but we know that it isn't. So in a sense, yes, I guess it it maybe does fall on volunteers, but I'd really like to frame it as a kind of mutual aid and kind of communal support activity rather than volunteering, because I think the reality is we do need to think collectively about access for everybody and about valuing pedestrians, because it hasn't always happened. And you can see it now in some of the kind of temporary things that have happened, for example, around the Northern Quarter, when access to bars and using space for commerce doesn't necessarily allow for access. I should also add that I really like bars and pubs, so I'm not necessarily criticising that. But thinking about, for example, not blocking drop curbs, to use a famous example, it's having that holistic view and talking to people. I just think is really very important. And I've also just seen something about pseudo privatization. That's something that absolutely drives me crackers. And I think we really do need to think about what the difference between pseudo public space and actual public space. I think we really do need to fight to protect that, because, and this is actually why the Irwell section seems really important, because it's being replaced by a permissive path in a private development. And to me, it really fundamentally matters that there are streets and pavements that everybody can use, because I think there's a bigger issue of cohesion here. It's where we meet people that are different to us. It's where we kind of rub along. And just to feel any sense of ownership and community within the city, it's really important to have that sense of belonging, and it cannot happen if you don't have public space. So the other thing I've spent a lot of time on recently is fighting against the public space protection order in Manchester, because that essentially criminalises homelessness. Now, I don't want to see homeless people on the streets, but not because they're untidy or inconvenient, because we've got a duty to care for them. So I think essentially a lot of privatisation of space is social cleansing and is gentrification. And I think Manchester needs to be stronger about using those words and about fighting them. And I think that should be, again, something that's embedded in everything we do, that, you know, cycling's for everyone who wants it, walking's for everybody who wants it, the city is for everybody who wants it.
And lastly, sort of follow-up question on that. For our members, you know, all across Greater Manchester, if they are spotting new developments which are these kind of pseudo private public spaces, and they want to make sure that there is proper public access, have you got any tips for how to challenge that, how to ensure that it is open to all?
That's another really good question, and I absolutely wish that there was one easy answer to that. We've used a variety of tactics, and to be honest, they haven't all worked. Like, some of you will remember the Library Walk campaign, which had literally thousands of people supporting it, and we lost. So you don't always win these things. There's other cases where developers actually have quite quietly agreed actually to keep rights away, and I can't necessarily name those here, but there's been some really off the record conversations, and I don't really have one way to do it. Something I will say that's really important is to use those spaces and keep using them, so that actually one of the weapons we have sometimes is embarrassment and comedy, and the ability to actually do things in those spaces to assert our right to use them, so that even if they are owned by somebody else, because the land ownership question, you know, I'd love to say there's going to be a revolution and we'll have a common treasury of public space, but we probably won't. But it's kind of keep using those things and making sure that we assert the right to use them, because the majority of times you can't get away with things. So I know First Street was used as an example in the question. And for example, it's absolutely fine to take photographs in First Street, and occasionally you might get stopped, but as long as you're not doing a commercial photo shoot, that's not a problem. It's okay to sit in First Street. It's okay to talk to somebody in First Street. These things that are absolutely okay to use, to do. Sorry, I'm wombling a bit because I get really angry about this. And I've just written about 10,000 words on it, so trying to sum it up in a sentence. But yeah, I think using places, and if people want to get in touch with me about specific examples, I'll do what I can to help or to advise if there's any particular legislation in place, because everywhere's a little bit different. I think the waterways and towpaths generally, there's probably going to be some work emerging there, because it's been a commonplace for a while, and areas need to keep an eye on are the new developments around Mayfield and what's happening next to Piccadilly Gardens. So, yeah.
Well, that's great to know that you're willing to be our kind of go-to sort of point of contact if we notice these things creeping in. I'm going to wrap up in a sec. Just one question from Pauline. She has this general question, but I'm going to put it to you because you had raised the problems of the nearly getting hurt in Chorlton on the while they're building the cycleway. Are there any is there any training going on with traffic management companies, like where to put signs to stop people tripping over them and that kind of thing? Do you know?
Sorry, was that to me? I don't know.
I think so. I'm not sure.
No, I don't know. I think there should be, and I'd really like to be embedded that kind of training. I have at various points emailed various people in the council about specific places where there's dangers, and seldom do I get a response. Occasionally I do, and I'm more than happy to act as a kind of amplification device for those sorts of specific areas. Just to clarify as well, I'm actually in Hume at the moment, so it's Chorlton Road that's the problem. But yeah, it would be something I'd really like there to be a rule, because there's quite a lot of the developments that have gone up for a long time around Angel Meadow and around Victoria were absolutely treacherous if you were trying to walk there, and they're temporary issues that just don't consider pedestrians at all. And I think that's why we need a much bigger mind shift or cultural shift that absolutely values walking, which I should also have just made really, really clear, when I talk about walking as a disabled person, I absolutely mean wheelchairs and mobility scooters and sticks and all those technologies that help people walk. It's it is probably the most accessible kind of travel, and one that almost everybody uses at some point. So I think we do just need to keep it central to all debates, really.
Well, thank you so much, Morag, for your perspective this evening. There's a couple more comments that you can read there about traffic training, I think. And just to wrap up, so thank you everybody for coming this evening. I think we've learned some valuable tips as we carry on campaigning. Don't feed the trolls. Maybe don't bother with petitions. If you want to actually see the Bee Network appear in your part of Greater Manchester, keep the pressure up on the council to actually hurry up and deliver. Otherwise, Chris Boardman might start taking things out of the programme. I think what we learned from Morag is the importance of ensuring accessibility for all and public access and the right to walk, push a wheelchair, scoot, stroll, all forms of walking under the very broad umbrella. So thanks very much for coming, and if you've got any feedback on how the virtual meeting has worked, then please, we'd love to hear from you. If you liked it, and if we're still not able to meet in person in January or so, then maybe we'll do another online one. But thank you very much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.